I think at the moment we're in this perpetual war situation, which in terms of the negotiations that went on in Turkey, you could see the negotiating position of the Russians was alluding to that, and it was alluding to it for a certain reason. So, for example, if you take Medinsky's line, it was, we can sustain this war forevermore. It would be a forever war. And he quoted the war with Sweden from 1700 to 1721, a 21-year war. And I think that's significant for a number of reasons. Firstly, its real message is to the West. Do you want to support Ukraine because we're willing for this to go on? Secondly, it's important in imperial terms, because part of the outcome of that war was that most of the Baltic states came under the rubric of or the heel of the Russians. And again, some of the narrative which is going on at the moment in Russia is, for example, saying that the USSR was never dissolved and that Ukraine is not an external problem, it's an internal problem. That is the sort of messaging that down the line, I think they might also get into in terms of the Baltic states, because my reading of the grand strategic objective of Russia is that they still want to regain lost territory and spheres of influence. So, do I see Putin swinging for a lamp in 3 months' time? Absolutely not. Do I see a continuation of this war in 3 months' time? Yes, unless the Americans can do something significant in terms of the sanctions regime. And we've got this sort of potential legislature executive split when we have the Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal notion that in the Senate they'll bring a bill forward to impose 500% sanctions and secondary sanctions on those who are supporting Russia. And would that then also lead to greater military support from America? And that is something that that Trump himself has steered away from. He seems to have taken the Putin line that he wants to keep them at the talks, and that's why he personally doesn't want to impose sanctions. He's also, in the last 2 weeks, it seems to me, taken hook, line, and sink the Russian line that there should be negotiations, then a ceasefire. Whereas from a Western and Ukrainian perspective, it was a ceasefire for 30 days, and the first date of that was, of course, going to be the 11th of March. What I think Putin has done incredibly well, and the Russians have done incredibly well, is that every major intelligence agency in the West generally has a human factors analysis sort of section, which looks at how you best play, manage, talk to a potential adversary. That's what the Russians have done very well in both the Putin talks with Trump, and in some of their responses to what Trump has said. What are the various notions of escalation, and how do you escalate? You can escalate by weapons, objectives, targets, geography, domains, i.e. space. The response to playing with fire from Trump is always that you get someone, normally a rhetorician like Medvedev, saying that we're going to World War III. This is often not the case, but is due to induce a non-action from the West. It's really to induce a form of appeasement, to scare people. One of the strategic truisms of all time is that you would never fight a war on two fronts. And if you're having enough trouble on just subduing Ukraine, which you thought you would get to topple over within 3 or 5 days, and suddenly you go to war with NATO, which, if it realizes its true combat potential and willpower, Russia would be destroyed pretty quickly. It would implode either economically or politically. So it's really the rhetoric to try and induce a non-action from the West, which is why you get this sort of stuff from Medvedev, and also often from Lavrov as well, saying that it's a proxy war, and that we would become direct participants in this war. That's the sort of language he's used about Germany in the last few days. None of that is really true. Again, that's a framing bias, one from their perspective, which they would use. It isn't a proxy war. This is a war where we are supporting the legitimate sovereign aspirations of Ukraine, within the international community and within the rubric of international law. You have to go back to the understanding that all wars are fought for political reasons. The political reason that Ukraine is fighting is to make sure that it remains as a sovereign nation. So the losses you are prepared to take if this is a war of necessity, as they see it from their perspective, is probably different than if you are fighting a war of choice, which in pure logic terms, you would say the Russia are fighting. But if you've got an imperial agenda, and you go back to the July 2021 essay of Putin, where essentially he was saying there's no such thing as a Ukrainian, you're all Russian, and you need to be reincorporated into the Russian entity, then you're also probably prepared to take losses which are disproportionate to what a normal rational man would do. So in pure numerical terms, the numbers may therefore be not as relevant as a Western mindset might think. And that is why when you go back again to Peskov, for example, saying that we will fight on until all the military objectives are secured, and someone like Lavrov saying that a ceasefire is a road to nowhere. So Russia still has these pretty maximalist objectives. And this is where we're really going to get into the nitty-gritty of what is the real decision point for America. And that will be when we have the memorandum on the potential future peace treaty from Russia, when they give what they seek to achieve in this. And if that says things like Ukraine must be caveated to 80,000 people, it must never be allowed to join NATO, there must be no foreign troops in NATO, no foreign troops ever stationed in Ukraine, there must be no Western equipment supplied to Ukraine, they must give the 4+1, which might become the 6+1 in terms of the parts of the territory that they've already seized, that Zelensky must go, that there must be a Western-leaning government in Ukraine. Now that actually is what we would probably term a surrender peace or capitulation peace. If that is the way the Americans see it, then I think they would probably tilt towards the Ukrainians. But there's also always caveats on that, because it might be that Trump will throw Ukraine under the bus on the notion that having an economic relationship post-war with Russia trumps his views of having an economic relationship with Ukraine. One thing that is certain is this notion that we went from February when Trump was berating Zelensky and saying you hold no cars, to the Treasury Secretary Bessant after the agreement on the mineral deal saying that you've now got a royal flush. That is nonsense, because wars are not fought for geo-economic reasons. They're fought for political reasons all the time. And the leaders of the world, particularly someone who's a nasty dictator who's been in power 25 years like Putin, are not accountants or bookkeepers. They look at power, the extension of power, and the extension of the Russian Empire from his perspective.